All right, good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight to the initial public engagement to discuss the city's Stormwater Master Plan update. The update is a one-year planning effort that takes a new look at the city's stormwater infrastructure with the primary objective of developing and prioritizing projects to be implemented over the next decade. The management of this infrastructure has many benefits, including maintaining and improving water quality, reducing flood risks, supporting resident safety, and lessening damage to public and private property. Since the last master drainage plan was performed in 2008, several things have occurred that have required this important document to be revised. Over the past 14 years, the city has constructed numerous drainage improvements that have improved the lives of residents throughout the city. In that same time frame, though, the city has seen several large flooding events that show that there is still a lot that needs to be done. We also have begun to realize how important water quality is in runoff and its impact on the environment. To speak about the update and where we are tonight with it, we have the city stormwater consultant, ISG, from Des Moines. They are well versed in urban stormwater planning and provide the city with a fresh approach to this important planning document. Tonight, they will show how the use of advanced stormwater modeling can help identify where issues exist on more of a localized level and how the city can tackle those issues. They will also explain how we can incorporate sustainable drainage ideas into stormwater infrastructure while addressing flooding issues at the same time. I'll hand it off to Craig Clarkson from ISG. Oh, Stacy, I'm sorry.
I'm just going to walk through the agenda.
Okay.
And we're recording first, correct? Did I get?
Yes.
How you want? Okay. So I think I spoke with everyone on the way in. I'm Stacy Williams, part of the team with ISG. We're here joined by Craig, who will speak in just a moment, as well as Andrea and Danielle and Justin in the back. So I wanted to just provide a brief overview for this evening. We're going to spend about 20 minutes having a discussion on just providing some context, some big picture goals, and some preliminary information on the plan, where we're at in the plan, and then what comes next. And so this is really our first time to hear from all of you. And so we're going to take what we hear tonight from you, as well as the online engagement with the survey that we'll share with you on your way out this evening, to then start drilling down and making some of those recommendations, as Charlie mentioned. So we're going to kick it off with a brief conversation on some things. Please feel free to ask questions as we work through the discussion, and then we'll have 3 different stations with some of the preliminary mapping that's been done and the modeling that's been done, some information on what is stormwater, and kind of talk with you a little bit more about what you'd like to see. And then on your way out, we have some survey questions that we'd love for you to participate in. It's pretty painless, around 5 to 7 questions, either on iPads or hard copies that to start beginning to get some information from you so that we can begin working on those recommendations. So with that, I'll turn it over to Craig to talk a bit more.
Thanks, Stacy. So just to piggyback a little bit off of Charlie here, we know, I think we can all agree that that we're witnessing the rainfall, and the rainfall, not only are we observing more rainfall, but the rainfall that we do observe is falling differently. And so what you have here, what we're showing here, is observed change in heavy precipitation, and this was from the 2017 Science Special Report, which has been the most comprehensive study put together on how the climate's changing and trying to make predictions on what to expect over the next century. And so this is observed change for the 5-year maximum daily precipitation, which is about a 20% chance of occurring on any given year. So it's a pretty decent event that would certainly cause street flooding, if not some property flooding in town. And so what you can see here is that in the Midwest, over the last century, we've seen a 13 to about 18% increase in those events. And so also in that report, they predict what are we expected to see over the next 100 years. And the report predicts that somewhere between the mid-century and late century, we'll see somewhere between 10 to 20% increases, even above what we're experiencing today. And so that sets the tone I think, of what Charlie mentioned of why are we doing this? Why are we doing this study? We are planning for the future to be prepared for an instance where this becomes reality and get ahead of it. And so that's what we're doing here tonight. A little bit of overview of stormwater and the Brookings drainage. There's really 5 main drainage areas in Brookings, and these are your local drainage areas, and all of these drainage areas make their way out to the Big Sioux, and then Missouri, Mississippi, Gulf of Mexico. But really 5 main drainage areas in town. The top 2, with the ridge, somewhat of a ridge on the railroad, but generally all of these 5 drain to generally the same place, where you have number 1, which would be your downtown and airport area. Yeah.
Be a little closer.
All right. Oh.
Do you stand up?
Yeah. So, like I said, number 1 would be your downtown area. Number 2 is university. Number 4 is that central portion of town. Number 4 is a central portion of town that drains all the way through the south, which is the largest watershed. And then number 3 on the southwest side, which is kind of where some of the growth area has been recently as well. So how does stormwater in town drain? Some may know this, some may not be so familiar. So generally, stormwater will hit your roof or hit your yard, and it'll make its way out into the street or through a gutter that's connected to the street, and make its way into on your right, which you would see as a curb inlet, and that curb inlet accepts that flow in the gutter and drains it off the street into a larger storm sewer in the middle of the street. And on the left, you'll see an example of some techniques that some communities and the industry is starting to move towards to try to compensate for some of this extra rainfall that we're experiencing. And so, particularly in urban areas, we're seeing a lot of what's called green infrastructure. And green infrastructure is really a practice that uses plants and vegetation, and it has a depression so that it accepts that flow before it gets into the storm sewer and slows that flow down and allows it to filter and improve the water quality as it's filtering through that practice. And so these are some of the strategies that communities are starting to employ that increase that flood resiliency, but also provides you that water quality practice at the same time. So it's utilizing, all those open spaces that maybe are mowed, maybe a space between the curb and the sidewalk. That's kind of the example shown here. So after it runs through that pipe, a lot of times, particularly here in Brookings, it'll enter an open channel of some sort, and those open channels may be beside the road, they may be behind a house, they may be between neighborhoods. And so here's an example on the right that's here in Brookings, taken while it was frozen. But this is one between the backs of homes, and it enters a culvert. And then on the left is an example of a neighborhood, a new neighborhood that utilizes some strategies to slow that water down, and that specific to that neighborhood. And about the mid-2000s, Brookings adopted stormwater requirements, along with a lot of other communities as well that use a detention basin or some sort of structure in that community to slow that water down. And so that's what you're seeing up on the top right there is a detention basin. So that neighborhood drains into that detention basin, and it allows that water to slow down and then slowly release, so that you don't have those negative downstream impacts of flooding. And so, in addition to that, you'll see some vegetation on the outside of that basin, and that vegetation is wetland vegetation, and it provides a benefit to the water quality by, you see how green those lawns are. Well, those lawns produce nutrients, and so part of the strategy here is to use those plants, those wetland plants, in that permanent pool to provide some retention and treat that water that's running off of that neighborhood. And so these are all strategies that we're starting to take a look at with this plan. And so here's a few pictures that the city provided of a few different flooding events in Brookings. And so this just, I think we all know that there's been some events that have occurred. And, just if you just look at these, you can see, Brookings topography, particularly when you get towards the outer parts of town, is very flat. And so when you do get more flow than your storm sewers can handle or your ditches can handle, once it gets out, it really spreads out quickly, much quicker than you would experience if you were in an area that had a lot more topography where the flow tends to concentrate in smaller areas. And so, how does the city operate right now? The city uses a fund that's collected through a drainage fee, and that drainage fee right now is used in large part to maintain the current system, to clean leaves and debris out of curb intakes and wash out pipes and maintain aging infrastructure, replace aging infrastructure that needs to be replaced. But it's also used for new projects and for improving areas of town that are experiencing flooding problems. And so those are the two main areas that fund is used. And so why we're here tonight, we are doing a citywide stormwater master plan and looking at the city as a whole. And we've spent the last about 6 months collecting data and producing models and creating existing conditions flooding maps that you'll see on the next slide. And so we're here tonight to get your input on those and see if what we're producing for those flooding maps aligns with what you've experienced. Not only does it help us point to different problem areas in town, but it helps us validate some of the studies and modeling that we're doing is very important. And so from the public engagement, which you see in the orange, we're going to be moving on to starting to look at projects to implement over the next 10 years, as Charlie mentioned. And so that's why this public engagement is so critical. It's not only to get feedback on our modeling, but also help us figure out how do we prioritize the types of projects once those projects have been identified. And so what we have built over the last 6 months is a state-of-the-art stormwater model, citywide stormwater model that essentially simulates what a rainfall event would look like in town. So it uses all of the surface and all of that stormwater infrastructure that I mentioned earlier, and it simulates real rainfall events and shows you what would be estimated to see. And so why this is so important is, before, it provides this non-biased approach to figuring out where the problems are in town. Instead of kind of anecdotally people calling in, complaining, complaint system. This actually provides a more comprehensive look at it, and just takes a little bit of the bias out of where does that improvements go first. So we're going to spend one of the stations after the presentation is to come by and take a look at the citywide maps and give us your feedback. And so another big piece of tonight that I mentioned is how do we prioritize projects? The city has done a great job creating a process in which once projects are identified, there's a big list of projects that the city identifies. How do you prioritize what goes first? And so the city already has a prioritization method that has 10 different categories ranging from citizen safety to traffic problems to property impacts to cost. And so that's one of the pieces of feedback we want from you tonight as well, is on in the survey is helping us identify what's important to you. And one of those pieces that we want to think about moving forward was the sustainability piece, and it also ties in closely with cost. Is how do we get the most bang for our buck? how do we not only solve flooding problems, but also improve our community by improving our water quality, by taking advantage of open spaces. So maybe that's a green corridor that's used for flood conveyance, but when it's not flooding for the other 99% of the year, it's used for recreation, maybe a trail, a walking path, a bike path, those kinds of things that we want you to consider as well when you're thinking about how would you prioritize the types of projects. And so it's really looking at that multi-benefit. A pipe in the ground only really produces one result, but maybe a storage wetland or a grass line conveyance channel with sidewalks or with trails, you can see the extra benefit that you get from some of those other projects. And so, like I said, we've spent the last 6 months, really we started in August, we kicked the project off in August. We been collecting data and really spent a lot of time producing models and that we're here tonight to discuss. And so from April, we're going to be moving on to identifying what those proposed projects are. And then coming up in June, July, probably the end of June, early July, we'll have a second engagement. We're going to come back and we're going to say, here's what we've identified as the top projects that we're considering, and we want to get feedback again on what those projects are. And then after that, we're going to go back and refine that even further down to the last engagement, where we're hoping to have that final list of projects that we want to phase out over the next decade. So with that, if there's this is for folks that are watching the recording. We just want to thank you for watching the recording. We're getting ready to move into some in-person stations here, and so we're going to end that. But please visit the project website at the end of this video and on the city's webpage and give us your feedback through the survey. So thank you.